You know, squad, sometimes I genuinely wonder if the British media thinks we're all fools, or if they've just convinced themselves that repeating the same lies over and over makes them true. Because this latest Channel 5 production, Prince Harry, My Terrible Year, is the perfect example of gaslighting dressed up as journalism. From the title alone, you'd expect Harry himself to have gone on record sitting in some confessional-style interview saying, "Oh, I've had such a terrible year." You'd think those words came straight from his mouth, raw and unfiltered, but they didn't. Not once, not ever. Instead, what they did was assemble a panel of Royalists, palace-friendly commentators, and what I call professional Harry and Meghan critics. They sat them in front of cameras, gave them the assignment to explain to the public why Harry is supposedly miserable, lost, and self-destructive, while at the same time bizarrely blaming him for complaining about his year, which again he hasn't actually done. They built the accusation out of thin air and then congratulated themselves for refuting it. This isn't journalism, this is theatre. Badly written, poorly acted, but aggressively marketed to stir up resentment. It's the same tired routine. Invent the charge, find the loyalists willing to say it on air, and then sell it as insight. And who do they trot out front and centre for this one? Ailsa Anderson, former press secretary to the late Queen Elizabeth II. Ailsa, who apparently thinks she still speaks for some royal authority, told the nation that Harry needs to stop painting himself as a victim and start being the hero of the piece. She even said people are getting a little tired of Harry supposedly thinking the world is against him. Let me pause here and ask, tired of what exactly? Because if you actually look at what Harry has done and said in 2025, there is very little that fits their "woe is me" caricature. The one major interview he gave about his family this year was after the High Court decision stripped him of the security he needs when in the UK. He spoke clearly, firmly, about what he called an establishment stitch-up, and the core of his message, that all he wanted was to visit his cancer-stricken father safely. That's not self-pity. That's a man pointing out a very real and dangerous situation created by people who should be protecting him. But you see, the royalist commentators can't stand when Harry speaks with specificity. They need to keep things vague and emotional. He feels the world is against him, plays better on TV than he has legitimate concerns about coordinated institutional actions that put his safety at risk. One is a soundbite they can mock, the other is a truth they can't spin. Ailsa went further, accusing Harry of being too impulsive and of making public private matters about his family, including King Charles's health. This is rich, coming from someone who worked at the very heart of an institution that leaks like a rusty old pipe. The same institution that's fed endless palace sources to the tabloids about Harry and Meghan's every move, outfit, and private conversation. The hypocrisy is staggering. Apparently it's only a breach of trust when Harry speaks for himself. When the palace does it to control a narrative, well, that's just strategic communication. Then there was her sanctimonious gem. If you can't trust your family, who can you trust? Well, Ailsa, maybe you can trust a family that doesn't sell you out to the press. Maybe you can trust a brother who doesn't rage at you in private and then brief against you in public. Maybe you can trust a father who doesn't weigh your security against his own PR needs. Harry's family has given him plenty of reasons to distrust them, from leaking Meghan's private letters to painting her as difficult, to conveniently feeding tabloid narratives that distract from other royal scandals. This isn't about mistrust out of nowhere. This is learned experience earned through repeated betrayals. The programme also brought in psychotherapist Emma Reed Turrell, who talked about reconciliation being absolutely possible if both sides show accountability and responsibility. She told Harry to stick a pin in your ego and focus on the relationship instead of being right. And then, of course, came the inevitable, there needs to be forgiveness on both sides. This both sides rhetoric is the oldest trick in the book when it comes to abuse and power imbalances. It frames the victim and the aggressor as equally responsible, allowing the more powerful side to skate by without actually making amends. Harry and Meghan didn't start this war, but they've been expected to shoulder equal blame for it from day one. The truth is, when Harry has spoken about his family, it hasn't been to wallow in self-pity. It's been to highlight specific harms, challenge entrenched media corruption, and explain why he and Meghan had no choice but to step back. But that reality doesn't make for good British tabloid television. So instead they spin a narrative of the lost prince, emotionally adrift, sabotaging himself and in desperate need of humbling. It's a fantasy that serves only one purpose: to reassure royalists that Harry couldn't possibly be happier outside the palace walls. But the facts tell a different story. This past year, the Invictus Games were a triumph. The event brought veterans and service personnel together in a spirit of healing and camaraderie that the world needs more of. Meghan launched her brand, which sold out in record time. The Archewell Foundation has continued its charitable work, impacting lives globally. Harry has been actively engaged in causes close to his heart, from mental health to veteran support. That's not a man spiralling. That's a man living his values. The real terrible year here belongs to the British media, because every time Harry and Meghan achieve something, it shatters the fantasy they've worked so hard to sell. The fantasy where Harry regrets leaving, where Meghan is secretly miserable, where California sunshine can't possibly compete with the cold embrace of palace duty. The reality? The Sussexes are thriving. They are free. They are building a life that reflects their priorities, not the outdated expectations of an institution clinging to its own relevance. When people like Ailsa Anderson say Harry should be the hero with Meghan toward a future they've built together, and that's something no smear documentary can ever take away. So, squad, I'll leave you with this. Don't let them write Harry and Meghan's story for you. Look at their actions, not the headlines. See the joy in their work, the strength in their partnership, the resilience in the face of relentless attacks. That's the real story, and it's one worth celebrating. The documentary Prince Harry, My Terrible Year, is full of gaslighting royalists. Sometimes I think the unofficial motto of the UK is "Misery loves company." Not just that, but it feels like people over there enjoy projecting their misery onto other people. People who live in Montecito, California, for example. I won't pretend that some awful things have happened to Prince Harry in recent months and recent years, but I find it ridiculous that a British channel put together a documentary called Prince Harry, My Terrible Year. With that kind of title, you would think that Harry had given an interview where he actually said the words, "I've had a terrible year." You would be wrong. Instead, the documentary filmmakers got various royalists to sit on camera and royal-splain how Harry is having a terrible year, while they blame him for complaining about his terrible year, something which he has not done. The big headline is that Q2's former press secretary said bitchy words about Harry. Prince Harry needs to stop painting himself as a victim because the public have had enough of hearing how awful his life is, a long-serving aide to Queen Elizabeth II has warned. Ailsa Anderson was at the Queen's side for 12 years as her press secretary and worked very closely with Her Majesty's grandson before he met Meghan Markle. Speaking to a new documentary about Harry's terrible 2025, Ms. Anderson has said he is every warm, engaging and kind person who has lost his way and needs to shed his victim mentality. In a message directed at the Duke of Sussex, she said, "Stop being the victim and start being the hero of the piece. Start writing your own script. I think people are just getting a little bit tired of how Prince Harry thinks the world is against him and how awful his life is." Ailsa, who worked for the Queen between 2001 and 2013, says that the exiled prince is too impulsive and has also unwisely made public-private matters about his family, including King Charles's health. She said, "I think trust is paramount in every walk of life. If you can't trust your family, who can you trust?" Charles and William will fear that if they were to welcome Harry back, private information would then be leaked, she said. Channel 5's documentary, Prince Harry, My Terrible Year, was broadcast on Saturday night. On it, experts have suggested that they believe that Harry does want reconciliation with his family, but his ego is in the way. Psychotherapist Emma Reed-Torrell said, "Reconciliation is absolutely possible with moments of accountability and responsibility on both sides." She said in a message for Harry, "Stick a pin in your ego for a moment and focus not on being right, but being in a relationship. There needs to be forgiveness on both sides." Gaslighting on a horrific scale. If you can't trust your family, who can you trust? In fact, Harry does not trust his birth family, and he has ample reason for that distrust. He doesn't trust his violent, temperamental, wrathful and enraged brother. He doesn't trust his weak, horrible father. He doesn't trust his terrible stepmother or all of her contacts in the press. I think people are just getting a little bit tired of how Prince Harry thinks the world is against him and how awful his life is. Other than his press during the Invictus Games, Harry has only given one interview about his family this year, correct? That interview was right after the High Court basically said that the Windsors and the Met Police don't have to protect Harry at all if they don't want to. In that interview, Harry spoke of an establishment stitch-up, but he also spoke about how he simply wants to be able to speak to his cancer-ridden father. He wasn't complaining about the world is against me. He was being quite specific about the British establishment lining up to purposefully put him in mortal danger if and when he visits the UK. Anyway, this whole thing is such a farce. If you value the truth, if you're here for lifting up Harry and Meghan instead of tearing them down, make sure you subscribe to Royal Sussex Squad. Hit that like button, share this video, and leave a comment with your thoughts on this so-called documentary. And if you'd like to support the channel so we can keep cutting through the noise, you can do so through Super Thanks. Every contribution helps us keep telling the stories the tabloids won't. Until next time, Squad, stay loyal, stay sharp, and keep sipping that royal truth tea.